All right. Well, Dr. John Momis, it's such an honor for me to have you here at the Tokaut Tokstret podcast. About 12 years ago, I was mentioning this outside. 12 years ago, I passed by you at a restaurant car park somewhere in Gordon's, and I just shook your hands and just said, "Oh, Dr. Momis, such an honor to meet you, and I would like to interview you one day regarding our constitution and regarding the making of our nation." And so 12 years later, or might be a bit more, that dream has finally being realized. So thank you so much for joining me here this afternoon. We are going to have a good time just learning from you. One of the reasons that I really wanted to speak to you and have a good conversation with you is to learn about those days leading up to independence, your personal journey in leadership coming up to independence, and then thereafter. So for today, I want to go back to the beginning in your life, in the life of John Momis, find out from you those things that are probably not in the public space. Your upbringing, where were you born, and where did you go to school in your young days? Tell us a bit about your early days.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm grateful that you have raised this question because many times we forget to appreciate what our parents or uncles or our leaders in the village have done to contribute towards what we have become. Now, I'm a product of a mixed marriage. My father is from Bougainville in South Bougainville. My mother is a mixed race, part New Ireland, part Chinese. Unfortunately, I was only 3 or 4, I think, when my parents separated. So I grew up only with my father. And I'm very grateful to my father, who taught me self-reliance, and you must think of other people as well, because he traveled throughout PNG in those days. It was before the war. I was in fact born in Salamaua, in Morobe. Salamaua was the headquarters of Morobe district in those days. And I was born in 1942. And we had to walk the Black Cat route to go to Waubulolo. At the time my mother was still with us, and it was a difficult time. It was not the usual thing for an indigenous person to marry a mixed race person. So my father and my mother were ostracized by the Chinese and mixed race community. And my father had a lot of self-respect. And he also said, look, if my mother Helen and I have decided to get married, it's our business. So he although he was confronted with many issues at the time under the old regime of colonial administration, my father learned to negotiate in life, and I learned a lot from him. And I only met my mother when I got elected to Parliament many years later. But I think I miss, of course, the good things I could have learned from my mother because I didn't grow up with her. But one thing I learned from my father, he said very clearly to me, education is important. You must have self-confidence, and you must also help other people. I went to school in Bougainville, in the first administration school. Bougainville at that time was all mission schools, Catholic, United Church, or Methodist in those days, and SDA. I'm triple lotu tasolo Bougainville. So I was because my father was a doctor boy. He was a medical only in a hospital, and the school was just next to the school. So I was very fortunate in a way. I went to school at an early age. I did all my primary education in Bougainville, and fortunately I set for Australian government, colonial government scholarship, and won a scholarship. In those days, 21 scholarships would be offered to Papua New Guineans from all over Papua New Guinea. I was very fortunate from a bush school to win a scholarship and studied in Australia. Did my Queensland, my leaving, that's your full high school. And that's where I met John Caputin. Mm-hmm. He went to another school. He went to Rocky Grammar and I went to the Christian Brothers. But he was only 15 kilometers away, so we met a lot in those days. So my relationship with John Caputin started a long time ago, during our teenage years. Yeah. I went to... I must say here, although it was an administration school or government school, the headmaster was a Catholic, he was an Australian. He invited pastors of other churches. There were only two others, SDA pastor and a United Methodist minister. So every week we would have religious instructions. And I really appreciate it because that tends to help you to have an integral approach to life,
Yes.
Holistic, you're not just secular, you appreciate spiritual things, cultural, as well as, secular, physical things. So I was very fortunate in that sense. And of course, going to Australia, when I finished my high school, I was fortunate again. I won a scholarship to study law at Sydney University, called the Walter Strong Scholarship. And I was also accepted to enroll at Port C Army Training School, a college, where Ted Dero and Patterson Lower, the first Papua New Guineans to become officers, went to.
Right.
In fact, Patterson Lower told me later, when he heard that John Momis might be going to the school, he said, "Oh, I don't know what he's going to do here." He was saying, you would have a difficult time. And I said, "Well, how do you know?" But anyway.
So which one did you pursue?
I pursued none of them.
Okay.
Either of the two.
Yeah.
Yes, I didn't, because when I came home, at that time, of course, the colonial government was really pushing for Papua New Guineans to go and, study further, to form the core of the public, indigenous public service. Because Australia really failed to prepare us for independence. So they were pushing at the last minute so they were disappointed when I told them that I was not going to the university, because I met a priest by chance in Bougainville, and he asked me, "Well, young man, what are you going to do?" And I said, "I think I'll join the army." Mm-hmm. And he said, "No, don't join the army, join the army of the Lord." Then I went to the seminary, became a priest. But when I was studying, I think I really appreciate my time at the seminary because I learned a lot of things. I learned social justice and the rights of people, the value of cultural values, as well as other things. So I think when I got elected to Parliament, I took a year out and I taught at a high school in Bougainville. Taught for 1 year. And during that time I was observing what the colonial government was doing in conjunction with CRA, the mining company, to get to actually force the people to agree to have their land taken by the government. And nobody was sticking up for them. So because I had studied in the seminary, I knew social justice, and I studied liberation theology, where priests and ministers working in third world nations couldn't just preach the faith, you had to get involved in action, helping the people, So I was brought up in that kind of milieu, and I really took a stand against the company and the government.
Yeah. I was going to ask
I
you,
was supporting them,
yeah.
and that's why the people, and it wasn't the Catholics, it was the SDAs, the United Church, and the Catholics went to my bishop and asked him to allow me to stand. The bishop said, no, I'm Patria, I can go on this land. They said, well, we find he's the only one who's sticking up for us. And at the time, of course, the Catholic Church was also really the only one supporting, when many other institutions and leaders were just standing by when the government, the colonial government and CRA were doing all kinds of things against the people, ostracizing them, treating them as if they were foreigners on their own land. And that's where I developed this very strong belief that the best thing you can do for your people is to actually enable them to participate in determining their own destiny. So alienation and giving people just benefits at the cost of lack of power is the worst thing you can do to them.
Who would have been, in those years, formative years, who would have been some of your role models, people you looked up to as leaders or who inspired you?
Amongst politicians, when I was in the seminary in Medellin, I met Michael Thomas Samar in Wewak. He was just a young man working for Radio Wewak. And little did I know, a few of us met him, and some of us ended up working with him, I also know Sir John Guise came to the seminary to talk to the students, and he just told everybody, I can't believe what these students are learning, because he thought we were just going to be this priest, Lord Tutasolna, but we were quite informed on other matters, and our commitment was to liberate and empower people.
In terms of the Sir Michael, you mentioned Sir Michael, I was watching your interview with NBC, was it yesterday or the day before? And you referred to him as a master trailblazer. What would have been, I look at you and a lot of our founding fathers, well, you're by default natural trailblazers anyway, because you're doing something that obviously you had not done before, coming into leadership and then eventually running a country. What was the process of education? You mentioned some of them, but what are some of the key lessons you learned in your education journey that really pushed you towards stepping into leadership and then eventually becoming a political leader?
With the kind of education I had in the seminary, man, the rational animal, is the masterpiece of God's creation. He's the pinnacle of creation because he has an intellect and a will, and then those two faculties enable him to think, to weigh the pros and cons, and to choose, make an informed decision, and choose his path for the future. You cannot force people to do what is against them. If you do that, then you'll have people who rebel. To me, the collective issue that lies at the heart of structural injustices in today's world is lack of participation by people in determining their own destiny. As you know, our Constitution also recommended a highly decentralized system to meet the diversity of the country.
Would it be fair to say that the things that we could have done under colonial rule as a people, or maybe as individual people, but also as collective people, that it was not sufficient compensation for not having freedom to self-determine? Because you look at what Australia could have done for us, maybe the handouts, maybe the good life, but that was not sufficient compensation for not being able to determine our own destiny. Would that be an accurate way to describe your concern for our people at that time?
Yeah, doing things for people, giving them benefits, and only benefits, is a way of marginalizing them and disempowering them. The best way of, if you want to really help somebody, you've got to liberate him, remove the structural impediments and legal impediments, and enable him to determine his own destiny. And he automatically does that in any case, because he has to, man cannot go on forever doing things against his own will. You know, so I think the best way of helping Papua New Guineans or anybody is to enable them to be agents of change and development, and not mere recipients, passive recipients of goods and services.
Yes. So coming to, what year was it that you entered politics?
72.
72, so a few years shy of independence.
Yeah.
What was it like in those early days, you coming into was it already called the House of Assembly at that time?
Yes, it was the House of Assembly, yeah.
How was it like coming in as a fresh member of the House, finding your way, finding your leadership place in the House?
Yeah. I never ever thought of becoming a politician. So psychologically, I was not groomed, I was not prepared to be a representative of my people in Parliament. And I actually thought for some time that I was probably the most unprepared member of Parliament, because I never thought of it, didn't want to become a member of Parliament. I was catapulted into the position by the people, and because of what I was doing in support of them against the company and the colonial government at the time. And I think I think in some ways I was probably the best prepared because of my study in the seminary, social justice issues, studying what happened in South America, the colonial other places, and of course one of the professors that taught me in the seminary was a Black American philosopher, and of course he shared many stories about the discrimination that the Black Americans had to contend with in America. So I was well grounded in, and also psychologically I was ready to fight against anything that would undermine the development and growth of indigenous cultural issues and in fact self-determination. We cannot be otherwise. We have to determine our own future. People may help us, but in the end, ultimately it's the people themselves who will have to make a decision to be independent.
Yes. What about the other, at that time, there would have been young members of the House as well coming up, some of them notable ones that we're not familiar with.
Yeah.
But what were some of the others like? Maybe those who may not have received the accolades that we've attributed to the famous ones, but some of those other ones who came in and your colleagues at that time being vocal about issues, about indigenous rights and all that. Maybe you can talk about one or two of them who really stood out at that time.
Well, the chief himself stood out. He was, as I said, to me, he's the master trailblazer, because he knew exactly that we were not ready. The Australians were much better in the business of administration, management, but they didn't really prepare Papua New Guineans. They left it too late. And the chief said, well, we won't allow them to further marginalize us. Let's make this bold decision to become independent and then force the issue of preparing Papua New Guinea to take over. It was really disappointing, Even at the time, there weren't too many Papua New Guineans who were when we started talking about self-determination, they trained some Papua New Guineans and appointed them departmental heads at a very young age, some 26, 27, with no mentoring, no support, proper support. And it's a perennial problem in all third world nations. When the administration is not well prepared, the indigenous people want to, of course, force the issue of independence, and they are not backed with a good, competent public service, and that's the problem we had. But we had to have that in any case in order to stop the further marginalization, disempowering of Papua New Guineans.
In terms of, I see where what you mean by saying they might not have been prepared enough, but it seems to me, at least looking back, that the young leaders coming out of the colonial grooming system, the education system, the building system, it seemed like they had character, they had vision, they had the courage to pursue the vision. And it seems like it's a product of a good schooling system or good education process that you all went through. Would that be an accurate reflection of the fruits of colonial education, that you at least might not have had the education in terms of an experience in terms of running a country, but in terms of personal character and discipline and courage, you seem to have all come out with that?
Yes, you need good leaders. Of course, it's the leaders who make good systems, create good policies and institutions. Without good leadership, you won't have the. And as you said, many of our leaders at the time were good leaders. They were good, even though we were not very good as pragmatists.
Right. Yeah.
In leadership, you need ideologues. You have to have an ideology and pragmatism. The two must be a proper mix between the two. And we certainly we believed in ideology. We were the ideologues, but as I said, we were not trained to become good administrators. So a lot of things went wrong, not because it had to happen that way, because we were forcing the issue to stop further marginalization of Papua New Guineans, because you can only put up with injustice for a certain amount of time. It was not easy, because it was not. We were not. I went to school in Australia, and I used to notice it very clearly that Papua New Guineans were marginalized, were not really respected.
In the what about today? In today's leadership climate, it seems to me that it's flipped, where we could be a bit more pragmatic, but we're lacking in ideologues.
Well, after independence, of course, Papua New Guinea leaders were quite good. We abided by the leadership code. The leadership code is different from the criminal code. Criminal code, you need evidence. Leadership code is for leaders who are the role models. And the leader must not only behave in an upright manner, but he must also be seen to be behaving in an upright manner. And that's not happening today.
Yeah.
In my time, it was happening. A lot of leaders, didn't use government money for their own personal interests. They were working hard, and the leadership was I think was worthy of the support they were getting, because they deserved it. Today, I think people don't care about the leadership code.
Why is that? Why do you think we've descended in our drive to be excellent leaders? That it's kind of the quality has eroded more into being more selfish as opposed to being national interest driven?
I think in general, not only for leaders but for Papua New Guineans, other people as well, there's no real effort being made to conscientize the people, to raise the consciousness of Papua New Guinea, to inculcate the values and principles. So we hear about things, but we are, when it comes to the test, when we lack the strength and the commitment to uphold those principles and values that are necessary for leaders to lead and serve the people.
Yes.
Today, I feel the people are really neglected.
Yeah.
The leaders don't seem to be accountable to the people.
Well, I was thinking about what you were saying earlier regarding your journey in education, and I thought there seems to be a contrast in the fruits of the education that our fathers, such as yourself, our fathers and mothers, received back in the colonial days coming up, as opposed to my generation and maybe one step higher and then further below. There seems to be that lack of character building in our education system. And I was wondering, what's the difference in our education system between the colonial days that seem to churn out really well-mannered, character-driven leaders or public servants or ordinary citizens? And I say this because, on social media, sometimes videos go around of the 70s and 80s of Port Moresby, Lay, even my WIWAC. And it's all really nice, beautiful, clean, and you don't see evidence of negative attitudes and behavior. They might be there, of course, but you don't see much of that. Whereas today, you see a lot of evidence of just bad character, bad attitudes. And it seems to me like even in the current day where we're churning out really well-educated young people, we're not churning out good character. So what's the difference in the education system of the old days versus now, in that we're producing less character than we were in the old days?
The 5 national goals and directive principles are very important. Unfortunately, I think they're not enforceable in law. They're non-justiciable. And that's why a lot of people just ignore it. And yet, those goals and national goals and directive principles talk about values and principles.
Yes.
Character, about ecology, looking after your environment and your rivers and seas and other things like that. And the government really, maybe we made a mistake. What we should have made it compulsory for universities, churches, trade unions. We actually recommended, but we didn't make it compulsory. We said churches, educational institutions, trade unions, public institutions must take it on themselves, make it their business to raise critical awareness of people, educate people, to make them realize that what the Constitution is promoting is for the common good of everybody, not just others. And also, I think the fact that Papua New Guinea is a highly diversified country, and that's why we recommended a decentralized system of government. The CPC was at the cutting edge of democratization and good governance. Provinces are not the same, different languages, different cultures, and if you just have one government, then you are excluding the majority of the people in the process of governance, the process of government. And that's why we recommended, in order to create a nation, you must create a community comprising of these highly diversified people, because they have the experience of participating in their own provincial governments, and that way they feel they would develop a commitment. Right now, we only have one government. In fact, the provincial governments which have been emasculated in 1995, when Sir Julius Shen was the Prime Minister, the current provincial government has absolutely no power. They're just an extension of the highly centralized government. And in this sense, we have come full circle. This is what we fought against. This is what Somalia fought against. We didn't want highly powerful, highly centralized government in Konedobu determining everything for Wewak or for islands or for the provinces.
Oh.
So I think one of the biggest mistakes, if we want to sort out Papua New Guinea, we have to bring back the decentralized system of government.
Yeah.
People must participate in the process of governance and in the process of development.
Yeah, it seems to me like the national government, with whatever power it gives on one hand to the provincial government, it takes back with the other hand through really clever legislation and so on. But I like bringing up the CPC now, and I want to just maybe go into some stories about the CPC. What was it like working with the CPC? All your core members, Chief Michael Somare was perhaps the ceremonial chairman, but you, being the deputy, ended up leading the committee. Well, what was it like working with the committee and all the different minds who were part of that? Maybe give us some insight in the boardroom meetings that you might have had, the debates you all might have had. We'd like to hear some of those really good stories.
Being the de facto chairman, I was the deputy chairman, but when the chief minister, when his hands were full, in the transfer of powers from Canberra to Konedobu, he said to me, "Look, you just run this committee," and it would be one of the most fulfilling engagements I've had in my life, being a member of the Constitutional Planning Committee, and also as a Minister for Decentralisation. I was responsible for setting up provincial governments throughout the country, and we had very good members. Maybe in terms of formal education, many of our members were not didn't have that, but their wisdom and intelligence, they were very, very good, very committed. Let me just mention some of them. Sir Michael Somare, of course, was the chairman. I was his deputy. John Caputin, Teyabal, Anton Parau, Mackenzie Daugi, John Kaupa, Matiabe Yui, Sinaki Giregire, Tony Ila, Sir John Geis, Peter Kasau, Stanis Toliman, Angamai Bilas, and Paul Langro. There were 15 of us, really. Paulus Harek was the chairman of the Constitutional Commission before us. Okay. They toured the world, going to South Africa, to Africa and Asia to study their constitutions and their forms of government. When the CPC was established, I said, we're not going overseas. Mm-hmm. If you need advice from overseas, let's read books or bring in specialist advisors, specialist consultants for a month or whatever. Our responsibility was to tour the country to get the views of the people, because it is their constitution. Nabi news you apply talk picture. So you like some of him short blow one man. You must go and measure this man. Would you measurement and man part man to master? Papua New Guinea man behind the feet long can shoot blongan or strauss blongan. So we conducted, in my view, probably the most comprehensive political engagement in Papua New Guinea. We went to all the provinces, district headquarters, sub-districts, even patrol posts. And we had public hearings, as well as setting up in every province their own committees, and gave them issues that we wanted them to tell us what they wanted. So everybody was very well, consulted, and consequently, we came up with probably one of the most it was a homegrown constitution.
Yeah. Did you split the committee into the different parts, or did you all travel around together?
No, sometimes we broke into two committees and toured to cover the whole nation. Some places we travel as one, but to cover the whole nation, we broke up into two groups.
Right. What were some of the most memorable comments you got in some of your tours out there from the ordinary people that you met?
The planters tried to use the members of parliament to impose their views on things. So we had to be careful. We didn't let them take over the CPC and promote just their ideas. We said, look, we'll listen to you, but in the final analysis, we have to listen to everybody and then make a decision to set up a democracy. What we wanted was a democracy that would allow Papua New Guineans to really run their government, talk about their kind of development, and also talk about ways and means of collaborating in a highly diversified country. And it was amazing in those days. People, when we set up the provincial government, for example, it was the first time Papua New Guineans actually had experience in running a government. Before that, it was all in Koredobo. Everything was decided here. So they were very happy.
In terms of the discussions that you had leading up to the writing of the report itself, the CPC report, what were some of the internal, most significant, maybe difficult questions that you had to wrestle with, that internally, amongst all these fine gentlemen that you read the names out, internally that there might have been some significant disagreement apart from, the things that you were agreeable to, but what some of the things that came up that you probably had really heated discussions about?
Citizenship would be one.
Citizenship.
Yeah. We in fact decided against having a permanent residency for outsiders. We said you either become a citizen or you don't become a citizen. But now I see, I think Papua New Guinea has now introduced, which is okay, the law that allows people, outsiders, to become permanent residents without becoming full citizens. We had a big debate on that, and we of course had a very, sometimes violent discussions with the expatriate community. We had to stand up. In fact, Barry Holloway, a well-known member of parliament, at the time he had a plantation in the highlands. But before that, as a young cadet patrol officer, he was legally Kiap in Buin, where I was. So he knew me. I was a student, a pupil, when he was a young 19-year-old cadet patrol officer. So time he come up, remember, so Michael said to me, you white man, people you say became money, you carry more paper around, all white man. But although he was a good man. Anyway, he walked into a club, expatriate club in Goroka, and asked because there was a lot of discrimination, he asked them, which members of the CPCU don't like most? And they said, John Momis and John Kaputin. And he said to them, well, they're just outside the door, come and meet them. So there was a lot of discrimination. But there were also other very good planters and other expatriates who supported Papua New Guinea's independence.
Yeah.
And they made very good contributions.
What were some, you mentioned outside some of not all your CPC recommendations were adopted by the House of Assembly. What were some of the significant things that maybe the House of Assembly rejected from the report, or not rejected but watered down or improved on maybe?
The provincial government system was one that they, I thought they de-gutted the provincial government system. Had they adopted what the CPC was recommending, there would be no Bougainville crisis. The Bougainville crisis was a direct result of alienation, marginalization. People felt that they were just being given things without their being involved in, determining what is good for them. John Caputin, I must mention, Bernard Narakobi was a young lawyer, just graduated from Sydney University. He joined us a year later after the CPC he was one of our advisors. And he was very good. He was very good. And
yes.
I think he was the first Papua New Guinean to become an advisor to the Constitutional Planning Committee. But Caputin was brave, very no nonsense. He presented his views on things clearly, but he was prepared to listen to others and accept compromises.
Yeah, you mentioned Bernard Narakobi. According to the report, he was legal officer with the Public Solicitor's Office, and then came over as a consultant, and you had his fellow consultants to the CPC, Professor Jim Davidson from the Department of Pacific History, Australian National University, Dr. David Stone, fellow research fellow in politics, PNG ANU, and Mr. Edward Wolfers, lecturer in politics at the Macquarie University. And I'm looking at these other names of these other gentlemen.
John Lee.
John Lee was the
legal officer
to the council, or council to the House of Assembly.
He was a legislative council.
Legislative drafter.
The House of Assembly.
Yeah.
Fantastic. These were good men. Professor Jim Davidson, of course, was the most senior of all the consultants. He helped Samoa to get the constitution, other Pacific countries. He was a Kiwi, but he was a professor at ANU. But he didn't. He only died 2 years after he joined us. He had a heart attack and died here, unfortunately.
Yeah, it says he died, deceased April 1973. What?
But we also brought in, on short-term basis, specialist consultants from West Indies, Africa, and England, I think.
What were some of the significant contributions they made to the CPC?
The specialist consultants?
Yes.
Specialist consultants, because of their experience in Africa and other third world nations. For Telford Georges, he was the Supreme Court judge of one of the West Indian countries. He served in in Africa. He told us, in no uncertain terms, that in the final analysis, it is the people of Papua New Guinea who will determine what sort of quality they want for the law system or for the economic system or government. You can listen to you can read about what other countries have done, but you cannot just impose what is good for them on PNG. Yeah, if you want to, maybe you can tailor it a bit, but in the final analysis, it's a Papua New Guinea system that must be created here. And that's why I think our constitution is made in such a way it is really one of the most, it's a homegrown constitution. We did not borrow anything from outside.
Yes. What would just a curiosity question, how did Bernard Narakobi, because you said he was pretty new into even the legal profession, how did he get selected to become part of the esteemed consulting group to the CPC?
Well, he had he studied law at Sydney University. I knew him. I was studying in Australia myself in the seminary, and at the time the colonial government sent in the police to beat up the women of Rorovana, the landowners in Loloho, and it was on TV. It was shown on TV. So Bernard saw it, I saw it, and I was in the seminary, and I protested. I told my Australian fellow seminarians that they were bloody wrong. They have no right to be imposing, So, fortunately, these seminarians I studied later became missionaries. So they also went to third world nations and later contacted me and said, "Oh, thank you for helping us, because now we know what you meant, working in a missionary country, where outsiders are forcing people, giving them money to manipulate them." And Bernard rang me up. He said, "Look, I think two of us must say something. So I got permission from my the seminary rector, and I went to Sydney University. We addressed about 10,000 university students about. We told them this is wrong. In our country, we own the resources. On the surface, it's below the surface. It doesn't belong to the government. No matter what the government says, custom, blow me play, talk all the time. God give him something on ground and belong you. We took a very strong stand. So it was not difficult when we were looking for a lawyer. I suppose there were other lawyers, but because of my connection with him, I rang him up and said, look, why don't you come and join us? And Bernard was also a very good writer. He was good on cultural matters, cultural issues, and we found it very, very helpful.
I want to segue into the Constitution itself, and especially the Preamble. To me, I regard the Preamble as a very profound piece of literature, and I think the National Goals and Directive Principles are very profound. What was the inspiration for the National Goals and Directive Principles? Why was that something that had to be in the Constitution?
Well, I said earlier, I was probably not well prepared to go to Parliament, but in terms of the social teachings of the church, I was very well prepared. I studied these things very well. Development, for example, is not just physical or financial development. It's intellectual, psychological, cultural. The whole development of the whole person. You must have a full person development of a person, integral human development. We also, and these are values we must promote. Development, can monitor us all. Don't sacrifice everything for the sake of money. Don't sacrifice everything because you want to get big money. You say, all right, we can sacrifice our land and our rivers and seas. No, we talked about ecological balance. In fact, we talked about ecological balance, promoting conservation and replenishment of our resources way before Rio Summit. It was the world meeting on ecology, environment. So we put it in our constitution so many years, a few years before they did. Things, participation. A lot of people think that development is just giving gifts to people. No, that is not development. Giving gifts to people leads to dependency. And of course, I want to make you dependent so I can manipulate you. That's not right. So ecological balance is important. Self-reliance and sovereignty. It's very important. Leaders must not undermine the sovereignty of the nation by colluding with outside, capitalists. You must. It's very important that the sovereignty of the nation must be preserved. So it's not only the people of Bougainville that who are being blamed for breaking the sovereignty. It's leaders who are sacrificing the sovereignty of the nation for some personal benefit.
My favorite national goal is goal number 1, integral human development. And when I heard you say you were well schooled in the teachings of the church, I'm thinking my suspicion about integral human development is confirmed, because in my research into integral human development as a concept, the only other place that concept is found is in the Catholic social teachings. Am I correct?
That is correct, yes.
Yeah.
I was imbibed with the Catholic social teachings, especially reading about liberation theology in South America, where you don't just preach things, you must also take a stand. Action on behalf of justice is a constitutive dimension of preaching of the good news. It's not enough just to preach. You must also take a stand on it matters. That it may not be too palatable, you know.
Yeah.
You have to suffer the consequences.
And there's no other constitution in the world that has the concept of integral human development articulated that way. We're the only constitution that has that. I looked it up. I checked if there's any other constitution that has that concept.
Well,
And
before the CPC, the full membership was appointed. Grand Chief appointed me as his deputy in '72, before the others were appointed. And I met with Professor Wolfers, who was then teaching at Edmund College, and he also taught Grand Chief when Grand Chief was doing his administration course there. And I mentioned to him the need to include social goals. And he said, what do you mean by social goals? And I tried to explain to him. He said, look, I've never heard of it. So being a political scientist who went through all the constitutions of the world, he said, I don't find it anywhere. I said, that's true, you won't find it anywhere. So we will be the first country to put it in our constitution.
yeah. So, you know, integral human development, and I found this.
And also, I think it's important we must appreciate, be grateful to the constitutional fathers that our cultural values and practices
Yeah.
are also very important. You know, we cannot be, even if you want to be a highly educated person, you must be a Papua New Guinean,
Yeah.
highly educated person.
Yes.
You can't-
And that's where the two pillars Mr. Hariknen was mentioning at the NBC interview about the two pillars that are mentioned in the Constitution, the handing down and the passing to our future generation, our noble traditions,
Yes.
and the Christian principles that are ours now.
Yeah.
And so I've always been a big believer in that as well, and particularly as I looked into integral human development, and I realized, man, this is a Catholic Christian concept, and so I was like really excited about it. And then, so I was going to ask, because at that time I'm not sure how the conversations went. These days, of course, we'll come to the new amendment that's being proposed to declare Papua New Guinea as a Christian nation, but at that time, it would have been the concept itself of integral human development was a Catholic invention. Was there any resistance within the discussions and the forums going on that let's keep this out because it's a Christian idea, it's from the church? Was there any resistance, or did people say yes, this is a noble idea, let's put it into the Constitution?
It's a Catholic invention. If you mean it's the invention of everybody, everybody, yeah. It is. Every belong Catholic Church as well. It's really the most human thing, the development of the human person.
Yeah.
As I said before, man is the masterpiece of God's creation. There's nothing better than man now. And not only that, he's also the co-creator. He has taken on powers thanks to the Paschal mystery that God come up man and mikarem heavy daina kira back long Easter and man tui kisim. As a church father said many in the 3rd century, St. Athanasius he talked, God became man in order that man may become God. Man am theologian and bishop man savitru. If we can fight one demolo narapla lo Muslim narapla. I talk him all straight, no God. Man mino pila nothing. Although he is already the masterpiece in this world, he's better than other animals because he's a rational animal. That's all. Over and above that, he has assumed, thanks to the Paschal mystery, some divine qualities.
Yeah.
So a man me development below man now you must good long spiritual side, cultural side, physical, psychological, now Islam.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was first, not I think, but it was first articulated by Pope Paul VI in 1967.
1967,
and I
yes.
suspect that would have been where the readings you would have come across the concept of integral human development. And this is the quote.
The Pope only he made it Catholic Church, time Pope we talk now, Mickey Molosem official.
Yeah.
But the theologians were talking about way before that.
Yes, agreed, yeah. But I like how his quote goes like this. His quote goes, "Development cannot be limited to mere economic growth. In order to be authentic, it must be complete. Integral, that is, it has to promote the good of every man and of the whole man."
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. And we have to, as a nation, return to that, I think.
Yeah.
We've
gone away from that now.
We've probably gone one-sided, just maybe political, economical.
It's money, by hook or crook, you must beat the other guy. You know, irrespective of whether it's morally right or wrong, right or not. They, you know, as long as I win, using any means, and that is wrong.
Yeah, and I like how the Constitution itself. I love the Constitution, and I love the words you all chose to describe integral human development. You wrote it like this. You say, "We declare our first goal to be for every person to be dynamically involved in the process of freeing himself or herself from every form of domination or oppression, so that each man or woman will have the opportunity to develop as a whole person in relationship with others." What was the inspiration for those? I mean, what's the goal in terms of, like, if we're going to break it down and make young people understand what we're really about as a nation? How would we break that down to simple terms?
Well, when we were under the colonial government, the Australian colonial government, they came to teach us to, you know, build schools for us and so on and so forth. But despite all what they were doing for us, we felt it, we knew that they were not really trying to free us. They were treating us as if we were mere recipients of goods and services. So they were trying to do things without our involvement. You know, that is why we talk, the collective issue that lies at the heart of structural injustices in the world today is the lack of participation by people in determining their own destiny. And Papua New Guineans, we were not determining our own destiny. We're being spoon-fed. We're being made dependents of others because they were giving us ready-made answers or giving us benefits. I don't know that. We would rather have the opportunity, the legal right to participate in determining our own future. That's why people I work in constitutional seminar. When we were looking at when the CPC was appointed, you know, we were just members of parliament. But people I know long mantu, people I got head, people I sit down and people I talk. We are not just going to talk about delivering services. Because you can give me service to long karabus man, it's long karabus. Platem karabus, they give me kai kai. We talked about, instead of delivering just merely delivering services, we talked about liberating our people and empowering them so that they themselves become agents of change and development. They become, human beings become both subject and object of development. Man yet by driving this development process, and yet by benefit. I mean, benefit also.
Yes. In those days, there was a clear visual representation of domination, like colonial masters, determining for you, this is good for you, here it is, here's what's good for you. What would be current forms of domination that we need to, because we are politically now self-determinate, but what are the current, maybe invisible now, they're more invisible, current forms of domination and oppression that we need to free ourselves from as we aspire to in the Constitution, as you look around the nation? What are those forms of domination and oppression that we need to free ourselves from?
The major one is, of course, a highly centralized government. It's highly centralized. Everything's determined here. We emasculated the provincial governments as a structural distribution of power and responsibility was when we had the provincial government system. Every province had a government of their own. because the problems, development aspirations in each province, in the province were different from the others, you know. So we decided we must have provincial governments in every one of them and let them participate and have the experience of governing. And at the time when we set up the people in the provinces were very happy. For the first time they experienced Manblo Place, people in Matimem Long, Okim Low Long government. And they had, provincial government in those days had the power to make laws, they could raise revenue. Today, no got. Or provincial government today, MOLO extensions are so on national government.
Yeah.
They
Yes.
don't have any power to raise revenue, they can't make laws. Only Bougainville because of the autonomous situation.
Yes.
Bougainville you can walk him low long and yet, raise him revenue too, but because long crisis, because of the aftermath of the crisis, ABG can't, it's not able to do that. But they have the power if they wanted to, if they had the, you know, have the will and the resources to make themselves self-reliant, they could.
That would be the biggest one. So we could say that's a legal or political form of oppression on the people. Are there, what would be some social constraints? Because as we look at the whole person, what would be some of the things that are holding people back from fulfilling their full potential and determining their own destiny?
The unfair distribution of budgetary allocation to provinces and to different functions of government. I said somewhere that it seems in PNG the leaders are having problems with the Indians. The leaders being the people, Indians are the leaders, are the elected leaders. The elected leaders have taken over.
Yeah.
They should be serving the real needs and aspirations of the electors, people who elected them. Now look at, especially with this DSIP, PSIP, wrong. It's the most corrupt system. It's been legalized and it's being used by people as a tool to get themselves re-elected.
Yes. One of the things we discussed a bit earlier on was regarding the education. And for myself, when I look around, I feel like there is a oppression of, you could call it ignorance. There is just a lack of understanding, and that becomes a form of oppression. People just don't know how they're supposed to behave, how they're supposed to free themselves from, say, poverty or that kind of thing. And I think the education system has missed the mark, and you would have made reference to that earlier on, that we made a mistake of not making it compulsory in our curriculum. Because I look at the Constitution, I think there should be compulsory reading for grade 1, not just university. It should be way down there. So how do we change? What do we change in regards to our education system so we educate our people correctly?
We have to teach our students, and you can start from primary school, the importance of having good laws, good policies, and good systems and good structures, because those are important, and not just developing individuals who are capable of manipulating situations and looking after themselves. We must inculcate values of fair play, justice. We must accept the fact that Papua New Guinea belongs to all of us, and not just to some. Those who are better capable, better able to look after themselves. No, it's Papua New Guinea is for everybody, and you must inculcate. You must drive this, the importance of sharing. In our culture, we share. Nothing. We always have consultative and consensual mode of decision making in the Melanesian society. We sit down and talk, even with our enemies, and we can reach truces even before peace. But we seem to be forgetting that we have these things in our own culture before. I remember when I started, I said I owe a lot to my own father, who always told me that you must go to school and be confident. Self-confidence was an important value that he talked about. And the second one was you must also think of others. You must share. You must, because no man is an island. And today, unfortunately, I think we don't seem to be committed to. Yes, we are highly diversified, but we can still form a community and develop a national consciousness that we are one country, composite of many tribes and many topoles, Nalukan Passin. You mean no army, you mean no soldier, but you mean march or regimentation, left, right. We are a highly diversified country, and therein lies the beauty of Papua New Guinea. The diversity is our richness, is our wealth. We should learn to promote this cultural wealth, this wealth, by enabling people in the provinces to participate. There's a principle in Catholic social teaching that says, a bigger body or better able body must not usurp the role of smaller bodies. Papai no can take over na roni mo kasama lo pikini. Lo pikini go useless behind. Must let him sample something. Lo pikini, even if he makes mistakes, by lining something. Principle of subsidiarity. In order to have solidarity, you must allow for subsidiarity. Bigger bodies must not usurp the role of smaller bodies.
Wow, awesome. Coming to some current events, do you think our current proposed constitutional amendment to declare Papua New Guinea a Christian nation, do you think it's necessary?
Totally unnecessary. It's ludicrous. PNG is already a Christian country. According to the Constitution, not many other countries have that, our Constitution.
Yeah.
But it also respects cultural values, the diversity of our cultural values. You cannot, there are moral values that are legitimate. We cannot create, what they're trying to do is actually, without saying it, is to create a theocratic system of government, a confessional state. We don't need that. Don't use Christianity, don't use unchristian means to create a Christian country. What about the other churches, the Muslims, the Buddhists, the Christian or Jews?
Yeah. I think C.S. Lewis, because I'm listening to C.S. Lewis audiobook at the moment, and he said something about that. He said a society is more Christian when the people become Christians.
Yeah,
not people don't become Christian when society becomes Christian. Something like that. He said. I'm paraphrasing, but
that's right. It's not enough to be talking about Christianity, having Christian, constitution, Christian country, when we practice the exact opposite of what Christians should be doing.
The work of making Papua New Guinea a Christian nation is the work of the church, and I think it should be left at the church to make PNG a Christian nation. Just preach the gospel, and people who buy it will buy it, and people who reject it at their peril. So we'll see how things work out with that.
There is also something very important, and that is a philosophy of ecumenism. You don't impose your religion on others. You must accept that there are other religions, and they are not bad. Unless they are acting in contravention of some constitutional law, you can't annihilate them. You have to respect them.
Well, I think our constitution makes reference to the Christian principles that are ours now,
that's right.
and I think that's enough. And we just discussed integral human development being a concept articulated by the Catholic Church, but wasn't exclusively owned by the Church. So there's Christian elements to our constitution that I think are sufficient to allow Christianity to be a strong influence in the country,
Well,
without having to declare it as such.
Having a highly centralized government is not Christian. It's against Christian values. It's against sharing. Sharing is a very Christian value. Working with others and not imposing your own will on others. Unless something is morally very bad, wrong.
And Christ himself said, "My kingdom is not of this world."
No.
And if we follow Christ, we don't have to make this kingdom of him or make it of him. So, yeah, thank you. There was a question. I invited some of my friends on Facebook to give me some questions that they might like to ask you. So I'll probably read one or two of them, and then you can share your thoughts. This is on the ABG process, autonomy and so on. This question says, despite the resounding voice of Bougainvilleans through the referendum, there is still a whole lot more that needs to be done. What do you think are the focus areas for Bougainvilleans to exert their efforts into be deemed ready for independence? And the supplementary question is, what do you anticipate is the most likely time frame until the call for independence is made?
Come on, the first question again.
The first one, what do you think are the focus areas for Bougainvilleans to exert their efforts into being ready for independence?
There are two issues. One, the government has a serious responsibility to look after the people today under the current system. Don't neglect the people, because the leaders were elected by the people to serve them, to serve their best interests. So we have no right, in fact it is wrong, morally wrong, to tell the people, oh, you will suffer past them. You know, people are winning something people are like. But of course, is to negotiate an outcome with the national government that is fair and that upholds peace. I don't think we have any excuse. Sorry, I don't think we have a right to bring about violence, suffering on people when we refuse to negotiate with the opponents. So both the national government and the ABG must accept the responsibility to negotiate, and in the final analysis have a peaceful resolution. And I think you need certain measure of political science, understanding of political science, to negotiate a good deal. Not just lawyers arguing over, I'm right and you are wrong. You need people who will create options that are acceptable in a situation where both sides don't want to lose something, but both sides have to lose something, to come up with a compromise or solution that will, in substance, address their concept of power.
Yes. And the supplementary question was, in your mind, what do you think is the time frame eventually when Bougainville will be independence ready?
Bougainville will take a while to be independence ready. In terms of provisional services, even the members of parliament in Bougainville are conspicuous by their absence. People don't know what the hell they do. And ABG, is struggling with issues. But I think I'm a great believer in consultative, consensual mode of decision making, whether you like it or not. Putting name tags on different forms of government, to me, is not the right thing to do. You negotiate and, push your hardest, and hopefully you and your partner, your opponent, come to something, and it is always possible to come to an agreement on a system that would give both sides what they want, what they in substance want.
Yes, yeah. So, could we say minimum 10 years away?
Yeah, within 10 years, something good should be negotiated, even incrementally.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dr. John Momis, for all your insights. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I always like to end on getting a optimistic outlook of Papua New Guinea. What makes you optimistic about Papua New Guinea going forward into the future, as you see the landscape now in terms of leadership, maybe economy, maybe culture? What gives you some optimism about the future of Papua New Guinea?
Number one, we have a very good constitution. We have a very democratic Christian constitution. Now it is up to Papua New Guineans who love this country, who are citizens, to develop what I call the pragmatism, learn the skills to make it happen, to create good systems, policies, and mobilize the highly diversified people to have appreciate a national consciousness which should bind all of us together to work for the common good of everybody. Because in the final analysis, what is good for us is the common good. You cannot just serve sampla laita sola, or lo rich man, or lo lotu man, or lo sampla lo big man that's or no God. The common good is the good of everybody in Papua New Guinea.
Thank you so much.
I'm very optimistic. The constitution is very good, but we have failed to implement it.
Yes.
So just let's implement it.
So we just need to return back to the basics, as they say. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dr. John Momis. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we wish you all the best in your trip coming up back home tomorrow. And anyway, we'll hopefully have some time again to dive deeper into some other topics in the future. But thank you so much. Appreciate it, Seth.
Thank you for giving me this pleasure and the opportunity to share with you some thoughts that I have that should be, promoted throughout the country to make this country a great country. It's potentially a great country. We've got everything we need, but paradoxically, we're not doing too well, despite the rich resources we have and the potentially powerful people we have.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate everything and your wisdom and your contribution to our great nation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.